All right, guys, welcome back to the show. And this week we have Elizabeth Pampalone with us, marketing expert, international speaker, coach. Her resume kind of goes on and super qualified. Elizabeth, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thanks for having me. I'm good.
Awesome. So, what I always like to do is just have my guests kind of introduce themselves, give them a little bit of backstory on who you are, kind of what got you to this point of your career, and feel free to tell us a little bit about the business.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I've been in business for 14 years. It's been a
Nice.
while, been a minute. And I started after a divorce, actually. I went through a divorce at the age of 21 and kind of lost, everything and realized that there was so much more that I could do with my life. And I started a business. It was very successful. I had that business for 10 years. And in the meantime, kind of in the middle of all that 10 years, I started my marketing agency, which is known as Absolute Marketing.
Oh, awesome, awesome. So you kind of had two things going on there at the same time, and learning to balance that portion of it. And now I know everyone's on the show, like George. The show revolves around setting our goals, and you're we're not marketing, and I know this, guys. I understand, but Elizabeth's process really intrigued me because, again, she things that we have talked about in the past in regards to time management and actually being productive is what really drew me to her. So, Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about Absolute Marketing.
Well, it's a 5-day system that I developed for myself because I was running two companies and that sometimes I was running three and four companies depending on the type of clients I had, or sometimes I just made more businesses because, who needs more work?
Right.
And so I developed this system so that I could actually get as much done as possible in one day. So the 5-day system is creating a brand in a day, a website in a day, 12 months of social media posts in a day, creating 12 months of blog posts in a day, and also 12 months of social or email marketing posts in a day. So we're creating tons of content with myself or with my clients
Right.
in 5-day period. And it's called batching. And I know a lot of people have probably heard of batching. It's pretty popular, even with anything. You can do batching with a lot of stuff. I actually batch my own podcast. I
Nice.
run a 2-minute podcast called Absolute Marketing Podcast, and I batch it. I do like 10, 15, up to 20 episodes at one sitting and just get them all done. So I'm really into batching, but what really brought all of this together was the idea of Parkinson's law. And I know you guys probably heard of that, right? Parkinson's law. Have you guys done that yet?
Yes, we have.
Okay, awesome. So I actually found out about the concept like in the book Profit First.
Okay.
And it's an amazing book by Mike Michalowicz. It's all about money and how you actually take your profit first out of your business. It obviously applies to so many different things as well. Like, you can use it in your personal life. I actually use
Right.
it in my personal finances as well as my business. And it's saved my bacon like a million times. But what he talks about in there is Parkinson's law and how if you give a task 15 minutes, it's going to take 15 minutes. If you give it 2 hours, it's going to take 2 hours. The work will expand to fill the time. And what I realized was that was happening in business as well as life. And what happens is people get so bogged down, especially in business, because there's all these tiny little details and tasks to finish. And then they really just focus on that. And they don't realize that they've just given a 5-minute task 2 hours of their time.
Right.
So that's really how it kind of all started and came about.
Oh, it's awesome. Again, one of the biggest things I love about our show is that we bring people with outside the box concepts. Now, for you, what is, I guess, with your coaching clients and even on a regular day basis, what are some of the biggest things that you see, and you kind of touched on it just a little bit there, that people are doing to actually mismanage their time?
Well, like I said, especially with business owners, I see people focusing on the tiny details. They'll be worried about what the subject line of their email is going to be when they should be worrying about how many emails do they need to create?
Right.
What's the outline of those emails? Why are they creating those emails? and then actually just doing it. And a lot of people get stuck at the doing it part. We
Right.
sit, we can talk, we can plan, we can write lists, we can make notes. I will give you an example. Is I keep a paper notebook on my desk, and I have last week's to-do list here. I have this week's to-do list. Like, there's so much stuff in this notebook. But what I force myself to do is at the end of a couple weeks, I go through it and I'm like, guess what? These things I wrote down, they actually didn't get done, but they kind of didn't need to be done. I put them down though, because in my brain, it was like, no, this is so important. If this doesn't get done, oh my gosh, something's terrible is going to happen. But really, when you go back and you look at your to-do lists, even if they're half empty, or like half filled that you've actually done them, there's a ton of stuff on there that you didn't actually need to do. So I think a lot of times I see for myself and like business owners I work with, they focus on those tiny little details and they forget about, let's start with the big picture and then narrow it down, rather than like, this one little detail is so important.
So how do you help your clients, and I'm sure people could take this away on even on their day-to-day life, on how do you distinguish, what's the big stuff and what is really not that important? What are some tips and tricks that you use to kind of help your clients see, hey, that's that's really something small that you don't have to focus on so much? What are some tricks that you use to kind of help them identify some of those small things that can either be done later or really don't need to be done at all?
Well, I try to break things down into first the large compartments, right? So, for example, if you're an entrepreneur, you need a brand.
Right.
Now, getting to the end of that, sequence, actually getting a brand and doing it is a whole nother story, but you need a brand. So we know we might need to do something, or might need to have like a category. We need to save money. We need to clean our house, right? Like this
Right.
big category that's just kind of this big random to do. But there's a lot of things, let's say within cleaning your house or building a brand, that you can do that are small little bite-sized pieces. And I'm finishing writing my book called Do This First. And I've taken a lot of these pieces and I try to get people to see that when you have a big piece like clean your house, uh, you know, washing wiping down your windows, or, disinfecting your doorknobs, or putting away the dishes, those are small tasks all within cleaning your house. And when you're building a brand, you need to create a logo, you have to have messaging, you have to have a color scheme that resonates with your audience. Who is your audience? Small tasks within a larger piece, which is going to get you to that end goal of having a brand and having a clean house. And so the book that I wrote, it really does take that idea and say, there's a lot of stuff you could be doing, but there are some things you could probably do first that are going to get you further and closer to that goal than if you were to just randomly do something. And so in my book, I actually write down one thing every day that you can do in marketing for your business that's going to increase your influence, your confidence, and your bottom line. So that kind of stuff, I think that can be applied to anything and everything. And I apply that to my daily life as well. We actually had a remodel project this summer that we did, and we hired someone and they didn't come back. they came for one day, they tore out an entire wall, and then they just didn't come back. And it was so frustrating that I came into the room, it was a mess. They had left tools, they had left ladders, there was tables, and we had a floor coming in 3 days.
Oh.
And I had no carpet, I had walls torn out, I had a client that I had to work with in 2 days. So I literally had 48 hours to make something happen. And instead of coming in here, which at first I just kind of wanted to walk in and cry, like this isn't happening to me. And also we'd already spent money. So then there's a low resource, right? There's low time resource, there's low money resource, and there's low man hours resource, because it was just me and my husband. We don't know the first thing about remodeling. Like, we're not that handy. And so I'm dealing with all these negatives, right? All these deductions and what I'm trying to deal with here. I'm trying to build. And I just look at the project and I'm like, what is it that I need? And I just start making that list of those small pieces, because I knew I needed to finish the room. That was the main goal, finish the room, get it ready for the floor so that it has walls and trim and it's ready. And I just started writing down, I need a piece that goes here. How long does it need to be? Measure it, and I just started breaking it down to little tiny pieces. And once I had my project list of all the materials, I literally got my keys, got in the car, went to Lowe's, and then came right back, brought all the pieces in, sat down again. Now this piece goes where? How long does it need to be? Cut it, nailed it up. Like it was
Right.
just so systematic and methodical. And a lot of times we get overwhelmed with the emotion, we get overwhelmed with the gravity of the situation we're in, and we forget to be methodical. And I think that it's good to have, that partner or that person there with you to kind of like, all right, let's think this through. Because I feel like a lot of times when we get emotional and we can't handle certain things in
Right.
that big project, like let's build a brand or let's clean the house,
Right.
other people have that like calm in our storm, right? And so I think that that's also helpful. And I try to get my clients to realize that. And that's why they work with me, I think, because they're in that storm. And I'm this outside person going, we got this. Like, we can do this.
Yeah, no, and man, there's so many great points that you just went over, and guys, if you've been tuning into to the podcast, these are things that I've talked about with projects. We're using different terms, but we've talked a lot about this in regards to the projects that we do in everyday life. Whether it's losing weight, yeah, the goals 40 pounds, but let's backtrack. Let's take a look at all the things that I have to do before I get there. Because if I just show up at the gym thinking that I'm going to lose 40 pounds and really don't have that plan, or even don't have the idea that, to account for any risk that may happen, it's probably going to fail at the end of the day. And I'm glad that you're kind of helping me reiterate that message kind of in a different way as it applies to marketing and even in our everyday life, that, hey, the big goal is there. Yeah, but there's so many little things that you can do and you should be doing to get you there. And at some point you stop, you refine, you look at it to see if you're actually moving in the right direction or if you're backtracking, and then you adjust. And man, it's great to see, just across any industry, these small things that, again, stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis could actually help us, not only just in business. This is not just successful business people that can do this, but the everyday person like me and you, if we just sit down and think about it, it can be done. And so thank you for that. Just one that just excites me a lot, because it's just, you're saying everything that I've reiterated that have had made your clients successful in their own business, that I'm trying to spread and help, everyone that's listening, that say, hey, if you got a goal, it can be done. It can be, you find that person, you look around to see if you have that one person that can support you, or you break down that goal and make it into small bite-sized chunks. And then, all last season, I think I said every podcast, you bring out a pen and paper, and here you are, you got your pen and paper, and bringing out a list. So sorry if I feel sound a little excited, but it's just, it's so powerful what those things can do for somebody. Now, between, as we talk those little things, how do you help your clients decipher what is a good thing, a good little thing to focus on, as compared to something that they may not need to focus on?
Well, I'll relate this definitely to social media. This is one of the biggest things that trips my clients up, and in myself in the past, is that we think in terms of marketing when you're running a business, is that social media is everything, and
Right.
that it is, it's life, it's everything. It's going to do everything for you, and that it is marketing. And that's just not the case. It is a part of marketing, but it is not all of marketing. And so I try to get my clients to, one, realize that social media is a piece of a whole pie. That's the first step. And then the second step is when they're focusing on, okay, now we're writing the posts, now we're getting that information, that message out there. The problem they have is that they want everything to be letter perfect. They want it to be so precise. They want it to say everything they want it to say, and nothing more, nothing less. Like, it has to be perfect so that their client will read it and go, "Oh my gosh, I need this. I have to buy this." And that's not really what it's meant to do. And they'll sit and focus on trying to write a post, a social post, for like an hour. And I'm like, it doesn't need to be that perfect. We don't want it to be garbage, but we don't want it to be, that perfect. And they'll say, well, it has to be right. And they'll have this like sense of what feels right to them. And that's what they need to accomplish or achieve. And my whole thing with that is, let's go back to the statistics. Let's look at the numbers. And a lot of people don't do research anymore. I don't feel like they do a lot of research. And so what happens is they'll hear something from this person, they'll hear something from that person, and they'll go, this is the be all end all. This is the research. And so I've heard these things twice, and so it must be true. But really, in reality, they're thinking they have to make this perfect post. On Facebook right now, the numbers basically bear out to say that your post lives in the newsfeed. And by lives, I mean it stays on people's news feeds for about 30 minutes. That's it. 30 minutes. Once you hit that post button, you got about a ticking timer that ticks down to 30 minutes. And then it's pretty much buried. It's pretty much not being shown by the algorithm anymore, because there are so many more posts that have been posted in that time period that have now pushed yours down kind of to the bottom. And so I'm telling people, you're spending an hour on this. It's living in the Facebook world for 30 minutes. If that, like, that's kind of, generous.
Yeah.
And you've just wasted 30 minutes of your time. And even that, you've probably wasted more than that, because that post really isn't going to be read by every single person. It's not going to take 30 minutes for them to read. And so now you've got these weird math numbers that just don't make sense. And now you've wasted all this time. And so I try to also relate that to when people have something they're focusing on, I have to do this before I do that. Right. I have to accomplish X before I can do Y. And they have these ideas that, some people don't even start businesses because they feel like, well, I have to have a business plan. I have to have 10 grand in the bank. I have to have, and they have all these ideas of someone said something here and said something there. When if they actually went online and did like a Google search, literally little bit of research, they could probably find out that they're ready. They actually could start something. And so I think, like you were talking about with projects, that's really, I feel like that's the case. A lot of people don't do enough research to know what the truth is by knowing it from multiple sources, not just this person and that person, well, they told me, and so that's the way it is.
Yeah, most definitely. I think a lot of people too, it's the way technology has gone now, where everything happens instantly. It has to happen right now. That has kind of hurt in a lot of ways of just being able to, one, people want it right now, and they set themselves up really for failure in some aspects, that because they have unrealistic expectations of what's going to happen, and even with that, it's like, if I have the perfect post, it's going to be great. And then they probably end up getting a little discouraged, because after 30 minutes or an hour, it may not have enough likes, there's no engagement to it, and it's just like, then they kind of go in this little spiral of just like, oh, I'm not doing this right, or I'm not doing that right. So when you do have those clients that kind of go through that, how do you bring them back out? Like, if they start to kind of spiral of the, hey, again, you're wasting time, a little bit of time, and not getting the return you want, how do you bring them back out of, oh my God, the world's over, my post isn't getting what it needed or what I expected it to get because of.
Yeah, I bring them back to their focus. Like, why are we even doing this? Are we doing this so that we have the best, most perfect posts in the world? Or are we doing this to help people and reach clients and educate them on what we do? And bringing them back to their passion helps them to, one, kind of have that like happy place, like that calm, it's not this major like failure, right? They're like, no, I do love this. I do like what I do. I do enjoy helping people or whatever it is that they do. And so first bringing them back to that, because we need to have that attitude, that energy there. And then saying, now, is that extra time you're spending making this post perfect, do you think your clients and your potential clients are needing it to be perfect, or is that you needing perfection in your life? And then they have the, the come to Jesus moment. And then they're like, yeah, you're right. And then they like, you're so right. And then they're happy to move on, because they realize that there's something within themselves that they're pushing out and projecting it onto their clients and saying, well, it has to be perfect for them. No, it has to be perfect for you. And that, I think, perfection, because we can never be that way. We're never going to be that way. That's a flaw in ourselves. And I think a lot of it has to do with societal perfection and, like women being really skinny and thin and like all these things that just you can never attain. But you could if you have a goal, go for it, but it's not about like forcing that perfection on everybody. And so I think that once I can pull them out of that and make them realize like, hey, we're all human, we're going to make mistakes, but we're going to do the best darn job we can. Like that is definitely our goal. And when they realize that, it kind of lifts this weight off of them. Like it's not all on them, right? That they have this passion. They can say that what they want to say. They can put themselves out there authentically, and that's good enough. And I think that a lot of clients and a lot of people that I run into, and even for myself, we have this feeling that we're not good enough. And when someone tells you, that was a good job, that was good enough, like that was great, that's enough, you don't have to keep going, we're there, like you made it, and then I think that really does help lift that off. And I was actually talking with a client the other day, and she asked me a question, and I was like, well, yeah, just do that thing. And she just kind of looked at me like, but I can't, And to me, almost like my whole mindset is so different than that. And I kind of looked at her like, why not? Like it didn't even dawn on me, because I'm kind of so far down the path on those things. I sometimes forget that my clients aren't there also. I'm just like, we're just kind of like buddies, like running. Right. And then I'll look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so far behind, like catch up, like, come on. And so she's just like, are you sure? And I'm just in my head already 10 steps, thinking ahead, going, well, yeah, and we'll do this, and she can try that, and this will work, and da-da-da. And I guess, it has to do with confidence. It has to do with having tried a lot of things, having failed at so many, but having seen so many of them also work. And so when you actually put yourself out there and you let the things be imperfect, and you show that there's progress in that imperfection, then you kind of gain this confidence, this self-confidence that says, yeah, I'm going to try stuff, and it's sometimes going to look like crap, and sometimes it's going to be so amazing that even I don't believe I did it.
Right. No, that is so true. Because last week we had we talked about with my guest in regards to self-sabotage, because it happens so often. A lot of times we don't even most of the time we don't even recognize it because of what we're doing and how we think. What do you do to kind of tap into clients' mindsets that you see that where they're like, that's not, I can't do that, or you see them kind of cutting their own legs from underneath themselves? How do you tap into to kind of get that out of them and get that out of their system?
We stop, because I kind of make them just like drop what they're doing. Like we're usually in the middle of something, we're writing content, we're making files, whatever. And I'll say, they'll say, oh, I can't do that, or I can't say that, or, I can't just call that person up, like, and make that sale. Like that's crazy. I can't call Mike Michalowicz and tell him that I want him on my podcast. Like I did that, and he did my podcast. So like, you can't just do that. And I'm like, I just stop them, and I'm like, why not? And I'm like, they give me a reason, and I'll say, nope, that's not a reason. Why not? Because it's all excuses, right? And I'll say that, no, that's an excuse. So what's a reason?
Right.
And they'll say, oh, this or oh, that. And one of my clients, she's so sweet. She was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Yep. And I had worked with her multiple times. I had used her business, I had used her service basically. Right. And I was like, yes, you do. Like I came to you, like, obviously you do know what you're doing. She's like, no, I just really don't. Like I worked with you, but that's different. And I said, no, why are you being an imposter? Why are you having this imposter syndrome? And she's like, well, I just don't think I can. And I said, you actually need to prove to yourself, not prove to me, not prove to anyone. You have to go out there and get a client on your own without anybody's help, because she had been getting referrals from people. So she kept feeling like she wasn't doing it. Like people were just handing her clients. And I was like, well, first of all, I can hand you a referral, but then you got to sell it still. Right. So that's one thing. But she was like, well, it's just not the same. And I said, fine, then you have to prove it to yourself. You have to go out there and get a client. And she drug her feet for 3 months. She just like, she kind of like would put a little feeler out there, and she'd like, when you stick your face out like the door and it's like freezing and you're like, nope, not today, and she did that for 3 months. And I said, why do you keep holding yourself back? Why don't you actually walk out the full door? Like just open the door, say, here I am. This is what I do. 2 weeks ago, she started doing that more. she started realizing that she was kind of holding herself back. And she's like, I don't know why I'm not getting clients. And I was like, well, I can tell you. And so she actually put herself out there. She contacted a few people. And she even called me when she did it. She was like, I contacted these people. I don't know if it was the right thing. I don't know if I said the right stuff, and she was all second guessing herself. And today she signed her first client all by herself. The person paid and signed a contract. And she was just like, I did it. I did it, and it was just about kind of pushing her past that comfort zone a little bit and stopping the talk as we were, while she was sitting there in that first session, saying, stop. What is the reason? No, that's an excuse you're telling yourself. Reason. Nope, that's also an excuse. What's the reason? And getting her to see that she was self-talking that herself back basically into a corner, and saying, well, you can't do this and you can't do that. I have that too. Like, I'm not, just because I'm a coach and just because I do this for a living, it doesn't mean that I'm like all like top of the mountain or whatever. But I do know that when you embody this mindset and you have to practice it. It's like riding a bike. It's like sewing or knitting or like anything you have to practice, cooking. You have to practice. And if you don't use it, you lose it. Yes. And I definitely believe that. And I actually, last year during the pandemic, I did so much networking before. Like, I networked 3 times a day for a year. I ran 13 networking groups. Like, I was networking queen here in Jacksonville, my city. And I even have a crown and everything. It's crazy. But I did so much networking. That was my way of getting out there. That was my preferred way, I would say.
Right.
And when all that stopped in March, in 2020, I was basically lost because everything I used was taken away from me in a sense. And everyone had to pivot, I get that, but I really had to re-examine, like, who am I? What am I doing here kind of thing? Because my whole identity was wrapped up in being the queen of networking and doing that and using that to my advantage. And now that I wasn't the queen of networking anymore, how does that affect my business? How does that affect my leads pipeline? All that stuff. And I sat down and instead of, crying, which I thought about, I was looking at things like, how can I replace networking? How can I replace this thing that has been taken away from me? And this happens at different times in our lives. Things just get ripped out from under you and you're just like, there's no plane and I'm falling, I got to build something else now. And I was looking at it and I thought, well, I like connecting with people. I like talking, obviously. Hello. Yeah. And I want to still connect with a larger audience like you do at a network. But what is that? And I was like, well, podcasting sort of does that. And I'd been on a few shows in 2019 and I really hadn't pursued it. And so I thought, you know what? What else am I doing? I have nothing else right now. I'm taking all the time I would network, which was 3 to 5 hours a day in some cases. And I'm going to put all that towards getting on podcasts. And last year, I got on 100 podcasts as a guest.
Woo.
100. I applied to about 400 podcasts. And I got on 100 as a guest. And almost all of them have been published. And the thing about that was, when I first started doing them, I was a little scared. My voice was a little shaky. I didn't have a good light. I mean, even right now it's a little bright, but like, I didn't have a mic. I had my headphones that had the string. Like, I was the quintessential noob, and everybody knew it. But I had something important to say. I had this passion for marketing, for business, for small business. And especially at that time, I knew the stuff that I was doing in my business was keeping me afloat, right? And I wanted to share that with other people, but I really didn't know how else to get it out there further because networking was kind of my main vehicle before. Right. And so I started doing these podcasts and sometimes I did 4 in a day, 5 in a day. And these were hour-long shows, 40-minute shows, sometimes 2-hour shows. It was insane. And I would do a podcast and I'd walk away from it going, God, that was awful. I said this and I should have said that. And I just would like analyze the heck out of it. And then I'd do another one. I'd be like, man, that guy was so cool. He was so fun. Well, we should do that one again, And then I'd walk away from another one. Oh, that was awful,
Right.
And it was this practice. And I had to keep doing it over and over and over. And I had gotten myself on all these shows. So it was kind of like I'd forced myself to practice, right?
Right.
And every day I was registering, I was applying, I was pitching. So my pitching got better.
Yep.
And every day I was speaking, and then my speaking got better. And I was a public speaker before, but this medium is so different because you're having a conversation, you're talking with someone, and you have to think on the fly. You have questions that are being thrown at you. You have to sometimes be visual, on camera, and then other times you're not. And so that's all a different dynamic. But what I notice is if I listen to my first episode from, March, April of last year to like December of last year, I can hear myself change not what I'm saying, but how I'm saying it, how I'm delivering it. And I also got more and more clear for myself about what I do. And I think that old adage of, the more you teach something, the more you even understand it.
Right.
And if you have to learn it enough to teach it, then you are going to like really get it. And so I knew my stuff, but it wasn't to the level that I feel like I've learned it now, and
Right.
that I really embody it. And I can spin it up, and I can also connect it to weird random things, business marketing to like personal life stuff to,
Right.
all these random connections. But it's because of practice. And that imposter syndrome at the beginning of the year for myself totally melted by like 30, 40, fifth podcast of the
Right.
year. And it was because of the practice, though. Just like if you go out and you're, ice skating, or you're, right, like I said, riding a bike, or you're, painting or drawing or any of that. If you do it once, it's going to look like, awful. But if
Right.
you do it a million times, it's going to be perfect. So, and as perfect as we can be, right?
Right. Most definitely. And I swear you described my year last year, because we started this podcast last year, and I go back to my first episode, and I held off on the podcast for like 2 years because it was, oh, what am I going to talk about? Or are people going to listen? And like the words that were coming out of my mouth, a lot of it was just, it was negative talk that didn't help me push forward on it. You know, I had the plan, kind of knew what I want to do, where I want to stream, where I wanted to get it to. And then, like most people, it's like, hey, we have the plan, but then we're scared to take the action and push forward. And then we start talking ourselves out of pushing forward. So we don't, I got into this vicious cycle. And then about halfway through the year, I was like, you know what? Screw it. Let me get a little microphone. Let me get it, my laptop, and we're just gonna hit go, and we're gonna make it happen. Just because I got to the point to where I kept having that conversation. It's like, okay, what if no one listens? Okay, like you have this passion that's like eating you up inside that you just want to get out, and you look from the middle of last year to now, it's like, oh my god, now you're streaming, now you got these banners, now you got cool microphones, like, and it grew just like you. It just over time, the self-doubt went away, which was one thing that I start to see in myself. And I tell people, even as you're doing whatever project it is that you're trying to build on your life, yeah, the more that you start to do it, you know yeah, you have one bad day, or you have one bad show, or one bad recording, or someone freezes, and it sounds crazy, but you keep moving, and you don't go down this spiral. And yeah, it's crazy. I had a guest just a couple weeks ago, kind of blew my mind on what he said, because I've heard it before. But he said words that come out of our mouth matter on what we believe in ourselves. And I was like, what? Like, the word, he was a writer and an author, and he's just like, the words that come out of your mouth that you speak about yourself is one, how you feel, but that's those things matter on how you're going to push forward with whatever goal you're trying to do, or whatever you're trying to do. Like, if you talk bad about yourself or don't give yourself the credit, then you're not going to push forward in anything that you do. And I was just like, oh my god, what just happened on my show right now? Like, I think I had my own breakthrough for myself. And it's awesome to see that, because again, guys, everyone listening and watching, everyone goes through this. It happens to everybody. No, not one guest I've had on my show says I'm perfect. At no point have I ever self-doubted myself, or not. Just find ways and tricks and by practice that we find ways through that, and you have to push through it. And that's one of the big reasons why I started the show, was to give you a thousand different ways on how people push through some of the mental blocks and the roadblocks along the way, whether it's your own goal, whether it's starting a business, to move forward.
I
Now,
think you're also offering something else though, which,
uh-oh.
and I'll give you some props for this because I think a lot of people may feel this way, but obviously, when we listen to a show or when we see something on, Facebook or whatever, we don't always make our feelings known about it, right? Because we're just kind of there in the background, lurking, just waiting. And we might say something eventually, but not usually. We just kind of sit there silently. And we probably are getting a ton from what we're absorbing. And I think a lot of your listeners are doing that. They're just getting a ton out of it, and they may not be like vocalizing it, right? So I want to kind of vocalize back to you is that you're doing something that a lot of other podcasts that I've been on, there's been a few that I felt like they were so like they cared so much about the people they were talking to, and I think you're one of those people. So, and I know that your audience is probably like, yeah, she's right. But I think I heard something the other day that just made so much sense to me, and I actually put it on my website because I was like, this is gold. This woman said that if you are struggling and it's like this uphill battle and you're just like, okay, struggle busting it out, then you're probably not getting enough support.
Like that.
And that's what I think you're really providing for your listeners and your viewers, is that you're bringing all these people in, you're finding all these great people that are just different and interesting and have, like you said, a million different ways to do the same thing, right? And I think you're really offering them support. And while I've been on, again, 100 shows, and I've just talked about what I do and I've related it to a lot of different things, I really feel like there's a few of them that are supportive. There's a lot that are informational, and
Right.
you listen for the info and you're like, that was great info. Thanks. And you might get a nugget or two out of it. But I feel like this show, just talking with you and like being on it and just listening to it, it just feels more connected and more supportive of the people that are listening than any other show I've really been on. I mean, there's, like I said, maybe 2 or 3 other ones that are up there with you, but I really
Right.
feel like this is probably the most supportive one I've been on. And I think that, if you are struggling, you're not getting enough support,
Right.
and you need to find that accountability buddy, listen to a show like this so that you feel like you're not alone. And that kind of support can make you go so much further than if you didn't have any of that. If you're just sitting there alone in the room with the piece of paper and the pen, like, now what? And
Right.
so I want to say also kudos to the listeners, because you guys are like taking that first step, and
Awesome.
you guys are much further ahead than other people that are just listening to an informational podcast going, oh, that was great info. All right, see you next week. That kind of thing.
Right. No, I definitely appreciate it, because it is something that I have a passion for. For me, it's, I want to see everyone succeed. I made a statement the other day that, I think there's room for everyone to succeed. And I think that we live as project managers every day in our life. We're a project manager, and you can take, I don't like to call life a game, but I will call it a project that you can manage your way. And I say everyone's a project manager. Didn't say everyone was a good project manager, but there's ways,
Yeah.
there's ways and steps that you can improve it. And one of the big messages when I first started the show, if someone could take one thing, I don't care what it is, away from this show to make their life a little bit better, then I'm super successful. Like, in my eyes, I'm, that's where the passion comes from on this, because it was one of those things to where when I did listen to podcasts more often and try to, as I wanted to start my own business and things of that sort, it was like, oh, that's great information, but like, no one's really connecting. Or that person sounds like they make $1 million and I don't make $1 million. And it's like, hey, I'm bringing in international speakers like yourself, people that have traveled around the world, but we're all just regular everyday people as well, that have built a successful life, and sharing that wealth of knowledge on, just like, hey, that may not work for you what the dude said last week, but I'm not that person. I'm way on right field, and this is how I do it, and that may resonate with you and you may connect with it better. And that's why I bring in, you know, just about anybody, not anybody, but just about, anyone that I can think of that can tie what they do on their professional lives with our day-to-day lives, and that's what drew me to yours, because it was like, she has this idea on how to market, and that's I don't hear people talk about, right? I hear people talk about marketing, that you got to have Twitter and the hashtag, but that's not her. Like, she wants to get you in, in a room for a day, and you're going to plan out everything for a year. Like, that's just, I could just imagine what her class goes through and the things that she's telling her. I have to bring her on the show to pick her brain, because I guarantee you someone can grab something from it on just, oh, snaps, she does that for a whole year. Like, there got to be one thing that I can take from that, because I'm wasting a lot of my time doing something else. But holy Jesus, maybe if I batch something, because again, no one's really talked about it. But if I do a bunch of these little things to kind of knock it out, I'm more productive. Holy crap, that can free up time,
And your brain, I think we forget that our brains are like an organ.
Right?
And they're, sort of a muscle, not really, but sort of, in a way. And that we don't give them enough space to do something. We
Right.
often will go from, oh, there's the mailman, I gotta go get the mail, to, oh, my to-do list, to, oh, the dog, oh, the kids, oh, an email, oh, and like ding, 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 oh, my phone. Like, there's so many things we're constantly switching between. And especially, my husband is a horrible multitasker, and he will tell you that, but I am a great multitasker. And it's to my detriment. And so, there's people that are multitaskers and people that aren't, but that's even a problem, because your brain does not have enough time to get on a roll, like get on a run and do the same thing over and over. And what happens is, like, if you think about a physical activity that you can do, so let's say you're doing like wall push-ups, right? Like the easy ones, right? Okay, that's kind of like, once you do enough of them, it almost becomes like mechanical. Your body just takes over and goes, we got this, like boom, 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 boom. And you almost don't even feel it anymore, because your body is just in like an autopilot, right?
Right.
And if you're doing something like that, or you're doing squats or whatever, your body's going to get fatigued, but it's going to kind of go at a certain point, let's just keep going. We might as well do 10 more,
Right.
and your brain does the same thing. And when we're able to batch stuff, we're able to say, today we are only working on website stuff. That's it. We're only building a website. And by the end of the day, we need to have this website finished, because our boss, me, you, we said this was going to be done. And we don't want to let our boss down. So, and I think that's really helps your brain to kind of get into this mode. In the first 2 hours I sit with people, oh, it's just like awful. Like, they're all over the place. They're like, what about this? What about this? Oh, and I'm like, nope, focus back. We're right here. We're doing this one thing. And it really gets people to have that like freedom mode, that their brain can just like, I can do one thing at a time right now, just one thing.
Right.
And I can keep going. And it makes your brain so much more creative, because it has space to actually use its whole capacity.
Yeah, no, and it's a great concept, that again, they've probably heard it said differently, but again, it's to reinforce that. Now, kind of switching gears on you, because one other thing that we've talked about on the show a little bit, and I know you may deal with it, and at least I saw it on your website, in regards to burnout. And
Yes.
being burned out, as within your business, within trying to figure out marketing. What are some of the things that you see with your clients that are causing them to burn out?
A lot of it goes back to what we talked about before, about all those little tasks that they've spent 2 hours on something that should take 5 minutes. They spent 2 days writing a blog post. It should have taken them 30 minutes. And so when you do that so much, and like you said, you don't see the engagement, you don't see the return, and you feel like you're spinning your wheels. If anybody's who's ever driven a car into sand or snow, and the wheels literally are just like, zzz, like there's no traction. That is so frustrating, because there's literally like nothing you can do until help arrives, right? And so a lot of people are in that mode, and that's what I feel like when they get to that burnout stage, that's what it is. And a lot of times too, we burn out from decision fatigue versus just fatigue, right? And
Right.
decision fatigue is so much worse because we make so many decisions in a day that we don't even realize how many there are. And I wish there was some kind of counter
Right.
that we could see that just told us, you just made 14,000 decisions in the last hour. Like that's, I mean, it's a huge number because we make a decision whether or not we're going to say a word or use a hand gesture or pick up a pen or take a drink of water. Like we make these decisions and there's milliseconds. We don't even know that they're happening.
Right.
But then we go into our email and we get emails from clients and newsletters and things we should do. And this person needs something, but this one's just a fun email. And that's just something from your mom. And like,
Right.
and then we have to decide, does this go in a folder? Do I need to do something with it? Should I leave it in the inbox? Well, I don't want to deal with it right now. And then there's all those decisions. And then, well, now if I'm going to put it in a folder, which one does it go in? And I actually read an article about decision fatigue, specifically relating to email. And the guy was like, you know what? You can actually eliminate a lot of that. And I was like, what? Because I had probably 1,500 folders in my email, and it's a lot because I was doing one for every client, one for every speech, one for like everything. And he said, because then when you look at the list, then you got to scroll to find the right one and all this stuff.
Right.
He said, just archive it. And I was like, oh, blasphemy. You can't just archive something. It's going to go into the never land of email and never come back. And what if you need it? And I'm saying this to the podcast as he's speaking. And he goes, well, if you need something, you just search it. And I was like, what a novel idea. I could just search it. And he said, I want you to try it for a week. He's in the, speaking on the podcast. And I'm like, sure. So he's like, try it for a week, just archive things. And if you really need them, you'll only have to go back a week and pull everything out and put it in folders if you want. And I was like, okay, I'll try it for a week. Within 2 days, my brain activity, like I could feel the difference in my anxiety level and my stress level,
Right.
in the way that my brain was behaving when I would go into my email account. And after that week, I never looked back.
Oh,
I took all of the folders, I archived them all together into one folder that's just called archive. And from now, going forward, I just basically, if I have to deal with something, it stays in the inbox until it's dealt with or until it's replied to. And if I have to, let's say I have to reply to you, but I kind of want a response back, there's that little snooze button, right? It'll bring it back to me if I need it in a week, if you haven't responded. But if I have already responded to you and I'm like, he'll write me back, no big deal, I just archive it anyway. And then when you write me back, it pops back in and then we talk again. So archiving is like the best thing that ever happened to me. And I think that fatigue, that seems like a small thing. Like, so it's just my email, no big deal. But if you actually have a physical reaction to when you open your email inbox or when you see that little red number on your phone, that is a huge thing that you don't realize how much it impacts you physically, emotionally, mentally, and how it can impact your day, your business, your relationships.
Yeah.
It's email, for gosh sakes. But seriously, it has an impact. So I would encourage people to actually try that. When you're working with your personal email, your business email, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about putting things in folders, but try to get that inbox down some, right? Try to get some of that stuff out of there. If you think you're going to need it, just archive it. Your mail will save it. It's not going to let go of it. But if you don't need it, delete that sucker. Like get on that delete train and just start get rid of stuff. It's also going to sit in your deleted folder for 30 days. So you're really not going to lose it for a while. If you really thought, oh, maybe I deleted something by mistake. But get in the habit of doing that. Now my inbox has about 10 to 15 emails in it every day, but I get about 200 every day.
Right.
And so when I deal with stuff, I deal with it and I move on. And that's really, really helped a lot. So that's how I've kind of worked with myself with the burnout. And I think that decision fatigue is really part of that. And it's really a big driver. And I try to get my clients to do the archive thing. I've gotten a few to do it. Some of them are still hanging on to those folders.
Now, for other tips in regards to burnout, I know we're talking that portion specifically, but other things that you see, what are some tips that you that you talk with your clients about, whether it's, hey, getting your mind off something or eliminating something out of their process? What do you how's that conversation typically go with your clients?
If it's about eliminating something, this is something I have to do a lot because people take on too much. I do it. I get it. It's like, oh yeah, 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 yeah. Oh crap, I've got a ton of stuff to do. And it really comes down to, is this serving you personally? And I have a client who she has so much on her plate. She just will not let go of things. And she said to me that she had hired someone to do sales for her. Great. That's something she can take off of her plate. And now she has a little bit of extra bandwidth to do the things that are still on the plate, right?
Right.
Well, she tells me today that the person she was hired isn't really comfortable doing this, this type of sales, and she thinks she's going to have to do something different. And so now she's going to have to take back over this role. I said, no, we have to figure out a different solution, because she was just like, well, I have to do it. And I think a lot of times we feel like we have to do things ourselves. And, in a personal sense, this is a business sense. She thinks she has to do sales because she's the best salesman in her company, which is true because she knows the product better than anybody.
Right.
But there were ways that we could actually offload that. And we started brainstorming, and within like 2 minutes, we had a solution. And it was a perfect solution that she didn't even realize was like right in front of her face. So she's going to try that out and see how it works out. But personally, my upbringing was, you clean your house, you take care of your family, if you work, you still have to clean the bathrooms and make do the dishes and make the beds and make the meals. That was the way I was raised. And I still believe in those things. But when I got to a certain point in my business, cleaning my house gave me so much anxiety because I thought I had to do it. But then at the weekends, I would burn out because I'd be working again more, and I would clean my house, or I would try to do it at night, but I'd still be working, and there's all these things that were like conflicting with me. And it was just this huge anxiety around cleaning my house. And in my ear, my mother's saying, well, you need to clean your house. You have to keep your house clean, and she's like, well, you don't need a maid. Like, that was the phrase, like, you don't need a maid. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't need a maid. I can do all of this. I can do all of this. And that's major burnout, right? You get to this point where you're just like, someone asks you a question, you're like, what? Like, you can't even function. And I hired someone to clean the house. I felt so guilty. I felt so guilty. And
Mom's gonna be mad.
why do you have somebody clean your house? And when they did it though, and they were there for like an hour, 2 hours, and then I was working while they were doing that. When they left and I stopped working, I was like, it's 5:00. I don't have anything else to do right now.
Right.
And it was just this like moment of like relief. Like, those 2 hours that they worked, I also worked those 2 hours. And now it's not finish your work. Oh, now you got 2 more hours of cleaning, which it usually took me like 3 hours to clean my house because I'm like a slowpoke. But that was not also on my plate, plus dinner, plus, taking care of the dog, plus making sure my husband had everything he needed, whatever. It wasn't all this other stuff, the laundry and all this other stuff. It was just, your house is clean, your work is done, and now you can enjoy making dinner. You can enjoy doing something that you enjoy doing. And I think that with burnout in that case, like for personally, I had to get over some mindset blocks that I had about cleaning houses and that I had about the way I grew up. And not the way that I grew up was bad, but my lifestyle was totally different from my mother's.
Right.
She had 5 kids and she was a stay-at-home mom, and she was amazing at it, obviously, because, I'm a product of that. But, I don't have kids. I'm not a stay-at-home mom. I work from home. I also, I was working out a lot at that point.
Right.
And it was just totally different lifestyle. And so, and I had this different career. And so I had to get over that thing that was like nurture versus what's position I was actually in. And so I think that really helped me with that kind of burning myself out because of this preconceived notion that this was what I was supposed to be or supposed to do, when in reality, my life was nothing like that. And I was just putting these restraints or restrictions on myself to say, well, it has to be this way. So,
yeah, no, that's it's true. We all have, our upbringing has a lot to do with, how we react to things and how we do things. There have been times, where it's just like, I came of the mindset where it was just like, for a while I had to get over, how much money I was allowed to make, right? Like if this was this thing to where it's just like, no, you don't get to that point. Like if you get a job that pays you this, you should be happy. Like you should not want more than that. Don't be greedy. It was greed, and for the longest time I would stop myself from advancing, in my career or seeking opportunity, because it was just like, oh man, I'm kind of at that limit, that cap. Like I should be happy, right? Like my parents say, like if you're here, if once you hit this, making this a year, like you've made it, you should be able to focus on retirement and blah 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 and things of that sort. And it was just like it that didn't feel right for me, but I had to get over it and had to have that kind of self talk of like, well, why not? Like, why, if I have the opportunity, why can't I change the course or change, and again, it was just the upbringing. It was a different time for my parents, economy was, that amount of money was probably, we take that now and it's like, okay, well, that equates to double what it was, when you were my age and things of that sort. So yeah, that's one thing that I do see with a lot of people, that, just surrounding influences and not necessarily upbringing, because I don't want it to make it sound like all of our parents are bad and they
No, I just like you said, it was a different time. And like
definitely.
my dad, he's worked in the same job for 35 years.
Yeah.
And when I told them I was going to start a company at age 20, they were like,
Oh, you
are
don't
you
do
going to get also a real job?
that.
And I was like, no, this will be my real job. And it was just something so different for them because, and like you said too, like they were like, oh, if you make this, like, oh, you have got there. Like, but
Right.
when I got there as a business owner,
It's like,
no, I wasn't really there because really it wasn't all my money. It was the business's money, and
right.
so it was all these different factors. So I think you're right. My parents did a hell of a job with what they had. I mean, good grief. And I feel like I probably have definitely surpassed them in like money making ability and things like that. And I still feel like I'm behind the eight ball all the time. But I think it's definitely that, we have these things in our mind, whether we were told them at a young age or whether we learned them in college or whether, this is something I was going to bring up too, because this is something I heard a couple months ago and I was just like so struck by it, is that when we actually have something like a goal to achieve or whatever, the reason we often don't achieve it is not just because of our imposter syndrome or whatever, but it's because we don't trust ourselves.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of times, when I was growing up, my sister was like merciless. Like she was just, and I'm actually older than her, but she was one of those people that could just like tear you down in like 2 words.
Right.
And it was definitely for me, like she was like, you can't sing and you're awful and all this stuff. And it was a lot more worse than that. But that was kind of the main thing. She was like told me that I could never sing and it was, something I could never do. And why would I even try and all this stuff.
Right.
And that was me being, we were kids. And all growing up, she always said that. She always said that. And I would try and sing to annoy her because I knew it annoyed her. But it was still something that was kind of input in me that said, you can't do this. You're awful at this. And a couple, like, I guess it was about 10, 15 years ago, I had the opportunity to sing somewhere. And I'm like, I can't do this. I can't, and a lot of it was because I didn't trust myself. And the first time that I had the opportunity, I didn't take it. I kind of almost got there and I was like, no, never mind, I'm not going to do it. And a friend of mine was like, you have to do this. And he really pushed me to do the second one. And I did. And it was okay. I wasn't the best. There's a recording somewhere. Don't watch it. But the first time and the second time I was really scared because the first time I had let myself down. I said I was going to do it and then I didn't. And I think we don't trust ourselves because we kind of break the promise to ourselves. We say we're going to lose the weight. We say we're going to learn that thing. We say we're going to start that podcast, that business. We say we're going to reconcile with that person. We say we're going to get that different job or advance in our career. And then when it doesn't happen because of maybe it's circumstance or maybe it's even just because of ourselves or self-sabotage, it's almost like we're breaking the promise to ourselves. And this is definitely for me, like, it's like, okay, today I am not going to eat that thing that I know I should not eat. And then we eat it. And then we're like, oh, okay, well, tomorrow I will not, and it's almost like we're a politician to ourselves. Like, I will be doing this. And then it doesn't happen. And you're like, yeah, I figured, because, you're lying all the time. But we're doing that to ourselves. And I think that's a huge thing for us to realize, is that if we keep promising ourselves and we don't do it, we're not going to trust ourselves. We're not going to trust that person. And that's usually us. And so I've actually realized that for myself too. Like, I'm on a weight loss journey as well. And this, it's not about New Year. It's not about any of that. It's about, am I going to break that promise to myself today? And when I do, and I've done it a couple times this year already, where I've broken that promise to myself that I said I was going to do X, Y, and it didn't happen, right? Or whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, you know what? I forgive you for not doing that. Like, I know why you didn't do that. I understand the circumstance, obviously, because I was there.
Right.
But it's about kind of forgiving yourself and letting that go, and starting tomorrow as this is a new day, the slate is clean. But if we don't let that go in that way and choose to forgive ourselves almost like on a daily basis, then it builds up resentment towards yourself, and then you don't trust yourself, and then your goals can't really be accomplished because you blocked that way. You can't go that way anymore.
Oh, man. Elizabeth, man, it's yeah, that does hit home. In, I've been reading Atomic Habit, and that one's blowing my mind right now, and that one's going to have to be a whole different show for me once I'm done with that book, because a lot of what you're saying there, it's true. We don't trust ourselves, and I think it goes back to what I had mentioned earlier, with that self-sabotage, because now we're just giving ourselves a way out, and feeding into, like, yeah, I know you said it, and I knew you weren't going to do it, and you did it, and so yeah, you're not going to do it. And
I think too, like, if we had a friend in that situation and they were telling us that their significant other was saying those things and doing those things, we'd be like, girl, leave him, right? Like, maybe it's not to dump her. And then we'd be like pulling for that, like, get out of that relationship. That is toxic, We do it to ourselves every day.
We definitely do. Elizabeth, it has been a pleasure talking to you this evening. And for my listeners out there, if you are an entrepreneur and you have issues when it comes to marketing, or you just want to look at how you can help grow your business, where can people find you?
You can visit my website at getabsolutemarketing.com. And I have all the tools that I use. They're no secret. And I kind of put them together to make a secret sauce, but I give the secret away. And you can find that on my website. There's a little banner that says Get the Pro Toolkit. And I basically share with you all the tools I use and how I use them.
Awesome. Are you on social media at all?
I am on LinkedIn the most. That's pretty much where my base is. A lot of my business owners are there. If you're not on LinkedIn and you're a business owner, or you want to be a business owner, just get on LinkedIn, because that's where all the people are. So yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.
Awesome. And do you have any parting words or tips for my listeners?
Yes. So I think I've said all the things I can possibly say on productivity, and all the stuff we covered today was really awesome. I had great time talking with you. But I do have one saying that I like to share with people that kind of goes along with all the stuff we talked about today. And that is, this is temporary. And it goes for good and bad. When things are awful and you feel like the light is not at the end of the tunnel, guess what? The darkness is temporary. There's going to be a light. There's going to be someone come along and help you. There's going to be something that happens to change your situation. And so remember that the hard times are temporary, but also remember that the good times are temporary. And you have to always be ready and fortified and have your mindset right, so that when those bad times hit you, you're not like, God, why me? Why is this awful? Why is this horrible? And you don't have this pity party right away. Instead, you go, you get your boots, you put them on, and you're like, now what do we do? Now what's the next thing? How do we rebuild this house that's just been in a little million little pieces? Or how do we do whatever it is we're doing? Like, how do we make that next step to go forward instead of sit here and cry about it? So this is temporary. Everything is temporary. Change will always happen. and you just have to wait long enough for it to happen. And if it doesn't, then you got to go out there and make it yourself.
Boom. I love it. I love it. Elizabeth, thank you again. I hope the best for 2021. I know 2020 was what it was, but I hope 2021 brings you and yourself a lot of success. And again, guys, all her information will be on our website. So as you click on the profile, see the video, all her information will be there as well. So please go and check out her website, drop her a line if you're on LinkedIn. Again, have the conversation, like I say, with all my guests. You know, many of them are open to just have the conversation and being curious. And you know, Elizabeth is one of those. We chat on LinkedIn. So again, thank you, and I hope you have a great 2021.
Thanks, you too.